Hi, everybody. My name is George Woodbury from College of the Sequoias in Visalia, California, and I'm here today with my friend and co-author Michael Sullivan from Joliet Junior College. We're here today to talk to you about transitioning to a co-requisite statistics model. Our contact information and websites are shown on this first screen, and we want to thank everybody for your attendance and participation today. We know your time's valuable, and we wanted to let you know that we appreciate all that you're doing to help your students. Thanks to AB 705 here in California, things are changing in math departments all over the state. Today, we'll be discussing the impact of AB 705 on intro stats. We feel our presentation will be helpful whether you're an instructor who's never even taken statistics, an instructor who's about to teach their first statistics course, or an instructor trying to figure out how to teach students who will be coming into our statistics classrooms without the traditional prerequisite coursework. We'll be addressing questions we have heard from instructors all over the country as they have found themselves in the position we now find ourselves in here in California. We'll be sharing tools that we've developed to help students and first-time instructors to be successful, as well as materials and strategies that we use in our own classrooms. We'll also discuss co-requisite support classes and materials that we've developed to help get the most out of these classes. Let's get started. The question that we get the most throughout the country is, how is teaching statistics different than teaching a math course? And I recommend that you check out the GAISE report, G-A-I-S-E. The GAISE report stands for Guidelines for Assessment and Instruction in Statistics Education. And this report is endorsed both by the American Stat Association and AMATIC. And there's a link that will take you directly to it, or you can search for GAISE on the internet. So again, this is both sponsored or supported by the American Statistical Association and AMATIC. And it's really important that we talk about their 6 recommendations. The first is to teach statistical thinking. Second, focus on conceptual understanding. 3, integrate real data with a context and purpose. 4, foster active learning. 5, use technology to explore concepts and analyze data. And finally, number 6, use assessments to improve and evaluate student learning. Now, the text that we're talking about today, Interactive Statistics, was written with these 6 recommendations at the forefront. It's important that we think about emphasizing the use of technology and suggest that by-hand computation should be de-emphasized, but also that technology can and should be used to develop conceptual understanding through the use of resources such as applets. Instructors should not attempt to teach this course as if it was a math class. Statistics is different than mathematics.
I wanted to talk to you about the overall philosophy of the course. The overall philosophy of this text is read a little, watch a little, and do a little. So this product may be used to assist adjuncts and professors new to the subjects of statistics in learning the material. Many of the instructors who are being asked to teach statistics are doing so for the very first time. In fact, their only experience with stats might be their graduate course. The intro course is about the process of statistics. That is, identify a research objective, collect the data needed to answer the question in the research objective, describe the data, and then finally, statistical inference. That is, taking the information learned from the sample and generalizing it to the population. The material that is in Interactive Statistics will get you ready for day 1 and allow your students to be engaged in learning statistics. So on the screen, you're seeing a screen capture of the MyLab course. Again, this course is written entirely in MyLab Statistics. The left side of the screen is the navigation bar, and I'm going to show you the course live, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things that are in the course. First and foremost, we have the Welcome to the Interactive Statistics with Integrated Review. This course comes complete with co-requisite material that you can use to help remediate your students. In addition, we include a learning path for you and the students that we envisioned would be followed in order to be successful in the course. We also include a preface to the instructor, and the preface to the instructor lays out the philosophy behind the interactive statistics text. And then finally, we have a preface to the student. And George and I decided to be a little bit different here, and we created a video walkthrough of the entire course. So we introduce ourselves to your students, and then we show the students how they can work their way through any particular interactive assignment. George and I both recommend you utilize this preface to the student and actually have it assigned to your students. So again, they're vastly familiar with all the features that we make available to them in interactive statistics. But what I want to do now is go live to the course. So like I said, down the left-hand navigation bar, you actually see the course. And here is where the textbook itself resides. So you can see that we have chapter 1 of integrated review, and then right below it we have chapter 1 of the statistics textbook, and then right below it we have chapter 1 integrated review, getting ready for chapter 2 of statistics. Now what's nice about the layout of the course is that chapter 1 of the statistics textbook introduces the students to data collection. That is, identifying the research objective, and then how do we collect the data needed to answer the question in the research objective. Because this is more of a language-intensive area of the course and there's not a lot of computation, while the student is working through chapter 1 of the statistics course, they can simultaneously be working through chapter 1, getting ready for chapter 2 of statistics. I'm going to elaborate more upon this, but again, this layout means that as the student's working through chapter 1, they can get ready for chapter 2. As they're working through chapter 2 of stats, they can get ready for chapter 3 of stats, and so on. But what I want to do is show you one particular section of the interactive assignment. So here is the 4 sections in chapter 4, end of chapter material, as well as additional section exercises. We put these in there hidden so that you have the option of assigning additional stagnant exercises via paper and pencil if you choose. But let's dive into section 4.1. And the read and interact portion of the interactive assignment is your actual textbook. And then the assess is your typical end of section exercises. So let's jump into section 4.1 of the interactive assignment. And here is the section. So across the top are tabs. So I'm just going to click the Preparing for Section 4.1 tab. And then you'll notice that what we do here is list out skills that we expect the student to have in order to be successful in the upcoming section. And we have assessments tied to your MyLab gradebook that the student actually has to work through. Once the student works through these 4 topics, and you can tell there's 4 by the 4 bubbles down at the bottom of the screen, and these are live hyperlinks as well, so you can jump forward, and then you can also scroll through the pages by clicking the arrows, or if you have a tablet, literally using your finger to swipe. After we're done with preparing for this section, we're then at this introduction tab where we list out the 5 objectives for the section, and each of these 5 objectives is hyperlinked. And then we also have a new feature for the second edition that's called, this video basically is a putting it together video where we're tying in the content from the first 3 chapters to the content we're about to learn in chapter 4.
In chapters 2 and 3, we examined data in which a single variable was measured for each individual in the study.
Notice that these videos are closed captioned, and I'm sure you recognize the voice in that particular animation. Now I slide to the next page, and here's that read a little portion of the content. Now, a question that a lot of folks ask is, all right, so all this content is online. Is there any textbook or physical print component with the material? And the answer to that question is yes. And I'm going to hand this back to George after I open this up. But I wanted to show you that there's a guided notebook that was written by George. And the guided notebook is available in both PDF form and in Word form. And the expectation here is that the student is going to take notes as they work through this guided notebook. So George, if you could just explain what you did here.
Yeah, so we wanted to create something that the student could take with them after the class, but also to encourage them to learn to take better notes and make their way through these assignments. So we've created these in both PDF and Word form. Some of my students like to type in Word, most prefer to print them out and write. These are also available to be bundled, so you can bundle them with the code if you want to send them to your bookstore. This is the first page from section 4.1. And one thing that we wanted to make sure of is that students could find their way through the assignment and know exactly where they should be in the notebook. So above number 1, defined bivariate data, it says introduction page 2. So on the introduction tab, this is page 2, right, which is right where we are. Now, a student would then fill in the definition for bivariate data, move on to define the response variable and explanatory variable, and so on. We have spots for students to write definitions, take notes, as well as each example that's in the book is already written inside of this guided notebook. So students don't need to copy down the whole problem, but there's room for them to work out the problem, add notes and reminders to themselves, and so on. In my course, my students fill these out as they do these assignments before class, and then they bring them to class so that they can refer to them as we work our way through some of the assessments and activities that we do in class.
Right, and so this example is on objective 1, page 2. And so if I go to the live course, here's objective 1. And then if I swipe or hit this bubble, there's page 2 and there's the example. So it's really easy to navigate between the guided notebook and the interactive assignment.
Hey, Mike, if I may, one thing that I did want to bring up also is the idea that in California, students are coming into our courses now without the prerequisite math courses. And while the amount of material that we're missing has us concerned a little bit, what we're really concerned about is the fact that they haven't had 1, 2, or 3 prerequisite courses to learn to be a better, more efficient math student. So the idea of the guided notebook is also trying to help students to develop better study skills, learn to take better notes so that they can be more successful in this course and their other courses as well.
All right, that's a great point, George, thanks. So as I mentioned, the interactive assignment, the whole overall philosophy is read a little, watch a little, do a little. And so here we're presenting the student with the definition of a scatter diagram. So obviously the student is reading a little. If I click the right arrow, here's where we get to an example, and this is where this product can be easily distinguished from a print text. Certainly down the left-hand side, you can see that we have a problem laid out for the student and your traditional print version of the, if I click show approach, and then if I click show solution, this is your typical print solution, right? But over here on the right-hand side, notice that we have 4 video solutions. Now these 4 video solutions correspond to 4 different approaches that an instructor could take in terms of solving problems in statistics. You certainly could go through and solve the problems by hand, and so we have a by hand video solution. But there are also technologies available that can do a lot of the statistical computation for us, namely the TI-84, StatCrunch, and Excel. Each of these video solutions is done by George, and he literally takes the students through not only the problem, but also the steps in terms of using the technology to get the output. So I'm just going to show you what the StatCrunch video looks like. Press play.
In this example, we'll learn how to draw a scatter diagram using StatCrunch.
So let me fast forward here for a sec so you can see what George does for us.
Here we are. I've typed the club head speeds in the first column and the distance in yards in the second column. To make the scatter plot, press graph, scatter plot. The X column.
So I'll just stop there. So you can see that George literally shows the students exactly what buttons to push in order to get the output. So George and I both teach this course in an online environment as well. And I guarantee you, neither one of us has ever received questions from students in terms of how to use the technology. George is that good in presenting the solutions.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Not only that, right below the video solutions, we provide this technology step by step. So let's say, again, you're using StatCrunch in your class. These are the steps that the student would follow in order to get the output using StatCrunch. So let me move forward. Oh, one other feature that's kind of nice is this button right here. If you click on it, it's a live link and it opens the data up in StatCrunch. And if you weren't using StatCrunch, just highlight the data, copy and paste it, and drop it into whatever other technology you happen to be using. So in this way, the student can literally work along with George in getting the output. So here's a do a little. We always want to assess the student's understanding of the content once they've experienced an example. And so this particular example is an example of what we call a reading assessment question, which is marked by the RA in the upper left-hand corner of the problem. Most of the RA or reading assessment questions only give the student one attempt in order to get the correct answer. The reason we do that is this particular problem is a drop-down menu, and we don't want the student going through and guessing and checking to get the result. We want them to use the knowledge they learned from the previous pages in the interactive assignment to get the knowledge. So I'm just going to fast forward from this problem. The next problem is not a reading, well, it is a reading assessment question, but it allows multiple attempts because of the fact that in this one, the student is actually working through and generating a scatter diagram. Up here in the upper right-hand corner lists out all the different problems that we have available within the section and the number of points available. This particular assignment has 15 points available, and so what you can do is keep track of the percentage correct and set these as prereqs in order to get into the end of section assignment. So for me personally, I set 70% as the cutoff as a prereq for the student to get on the interactive assignment before they're allowed to get into the end of section assignment. Another thing that we have in question help that George and I wrote was this tech help button, which is unique to our product. A lot of the times the students don't know how to get a result because they don't know the technology help. Click the tech help button and boom, they get the TI-83, the StatCrunch, and the Excel tech help in that particular problem. So let's move forward here. I want to just fast forward to objective 2. Now in objective 2, we're introducing the correlation coefficient. So here we give the formula for the correlation coefficient, and we realize that students reading this might be intimidated by the formula. And this is an opportunity for us to share via video how that formula is measuring correlation. Now this particular video is a video from my actual classroom lectures, so you'll hear my students in the background asking and answering questions. But notice again that this video is only 3 minutes and 30 seconds long. We intentionally broke up the presentation of the correlation coefficient into bite-sized chunks for our students so that they're not overwhelmed with one particular video. This video is a new video for the second edition. This is called a lightboard video. I'm literally writing on glass and then they flip me over so that I'm facing the camera. It allows the students to have a live person in front of them actually going through the development of the correlation coefficient. We always want to make sure that our students are learning via active learning whenever possible, and statistical applets are a great tool to have your students actually experience the statistics rather than being told what the results are going to be. So here we're going through an activity where we're illustrating or allowing the students to learn the properties of the correlation coefficient. What they're going to do is open this applet. So the statistical applet opens up, and I'm just going to show you what the steps say. Part A says if data currently exists in the scatter diagram, click reset, click create a scatter diagram of 12 to 15 observations with positive association. So I click reset, and now I just use my mouse, left mouse button, to click to add points into the scatter diagram. Click show, and then there's the correlation of 0.6424. And then it says things like move some of the points around to see how a weaker positive association is how that impacts correlation, and so on and so forth. And so after the students goes through these 5 parts, they are exposed to and have a better understanding of the properties of the correlation coefficient. Just to validate that they understand those properties, we also have a video that goes through the exact same activity for your students. And then we summarize the properties of the correlation coefficient, complete with pop-up figures. And then we move on to assessment. So here we're saying, all right, do you really know some of these properties? The linear correlation coefficient is always between what two values? That's my address. So then we click, see how it says final check. You get one shot at this, and I got it correct. Now, George and I wrote all the feedback that you're seeing for these RA exercises in case the student gets it wrong. And I think it's important for George to explain what he does if students get these RA exercises wrong.
Yeah, so we use prerequisites between the interactive assignment and the follow-up homework. And so students need to score a certain percentage in order to get to that homework. But if they miss one of these questions where they only get one chance at it, they may not be able to make it to the prerequisite. So I take care of this in a couple of ways. First, I tell my students when they see that warning that you only have one chance, that they should look at the question and they should go back and read through the previous page or pages to make sure that they know the answer. But if they get the answer wrong, I allow my students to send me an email in which they explain why their answer was wrong and why the right answer is correct. And at that point, I go back in and I give them credit for that problem. What I think it does is it gives students a chance to reflect on what they've done. And we know that it's hard to have quality learning without some type of reflection. So I think it's made a positive impact on my class.
That's an awesome idea. So now let me go back to the PowerPoint here. And we already addressed the guided notebook and showed you where you get it from. So now let's talk about how to implement this product in your classes. So interactive statistics was written to provide the instructor with the utmost in flexibility. George and I both use it in a flipped classroom environment as well as in an online environment. However, in the past, I've also used it for traditional lecture. And this traditional lecture is where the idea of these classroom lecture notes came from. The notes are available to your students to print out, and George will show you where you can get them later. They contain definitions, theorems, procedures, examples that are different from the examples in the text, as well as activities. The fact that it has examples different from the text is really important, especially for instructors that are new to the course. You don't have to worry about finding interesting or engaging examples. We've done that work for you. So I recommend that instructors that are teaching statistics for the first time utilize these notes in a lecture classroom. I personally use them with a tablet PC, and I literally write, as you can see, write on the notes and then share them with the students. So and by the way, these filled in notes are going to be available in the course that George and I are going to share with you. So I'm going to give you my course ID, and with that course ID, you're going to see the classroom lecture notes.
So first at the top of this, we have a really robust set of instructor resources for you. At the top are the two websites that Mike and I maintain, as those were mentioned on the first screen as well. The classroom lecture notes that we've been discussing, you can find those there. The Guided Notebook Instructors Edition is the same notebook as the students have, except the answers are filled in. So I've typed in the answers to all of those definitions and examples and so on. The idea is that a new instructor can then have that with them in the classroom, so it's easy to refer to things as they go. Finally here, we've got the Stat Talk Instructor Guide and the Instructor Resource Guide, and I'd like to spend a little time talking about that. So the Instructor Resource Guide, that was written by Mike, and it's dynamite. It includes tips on teaching the material, sections or objectives that you might consider optional or things that you should emphasize, some additional classroom examples. So here's an overview of Chapter 4, and then Mike starts to talk about what to emphasize as you make your way through Chapter 4. That's pretty valuable for a new instructor. One of the things that is really awesome about this tool, besides Mike's advice from teaching statistics for 20, 25 years, is that we also have some additional problems that you can use and assign to your students. There we go. So again, these are the kind of things that Mike and I bring to class and have our students work through in an activity setting. It allows your students to get in there, get their hands dirty. And we know that learning statistics is all about getting engaged with the materials.
And the other thing about this instructor resource guide is in red, those are all the solutions or answers to the problems that are in that instructor resource guide. So once again, the instructor doesn't have to worry about coming up with new or innovative examples. Between the classroom lecture notes and these examples, there's plenty to choose from for the new instructor out there.
We wanted to talk a little bit about Learning Catalytics here. Learning Catalytics is a program that was created by Eric Mazur, a professor of physics at Harvard University. And what Dr. Mazur learned was he thought he gave the best physics lectures and his students were really learning, but when he assessed them at the end of the semester, he realized that they were not learning at the level he thought they were. So he started investigating this idea of peer-to-peer instruction, where he would ask questions and students would discuss them with each other before they would give their answer. And so Dr. Mazur ended up creating this product, Learning Catalytics, and that comes with my stat lab, or my lab stat.
We wrote our own Learning Catalytics course. So what you're seeing on the screen here is the Master Sullivan Woodbury Learning Catalytics course. Each of those circles represents its own exercise, again, that George and I wrote. So there's Learning Catalytics questions for every single chapter. So if you want a copy of this course, all you have to do is send George or I an email, and then we'll be able to send you the course. Make sure you send us the email that is associated with your MyLab course. That way you'll be able to get access to our course. So here's an example of the types of question, a question type that we have. The nice thing about Learning Catalytics is it's not just that you can ask multiple choice questions, but you can ask numerical questions. Like you could say, here's some data, what's the correlation coefficient, for example. And you can even put in a tolerance for the accuracy that you would allow for the answer. There's matching exercises that you can include as well. I would recommend that you go to learningcatalytics.com and have a look at some of their question types. There's plenty of videos up there that show you how to use the product as well. But here's an example of a ranking question, and this one's pretty slick because if your third grade math teacher saw you wrote that 0.032 is less than negative 0.843, I'm sure the instructor would not be happy with you. But in a correlation environment, negative 0.843 has the strongest linear relation between two variables. And so it really gets the students thinking about how correlation measures strength of linear association, but also the direction of that association. Another tool that we have for you is this student activity workbook. The student activity workbook has activities written by chapter. There's usually about 5 to 7 activities per chapter. Some of the activities are going to be tactile, where you're maybe rolling dice or flipping coins, and others are going to be more technology, such as statistical applets. But in each case, the activities are meant to be worked in small groups or by you, the instructor, in the front of the classroom. Not only do we have the student activity workbook, but there's also an instructor guide that goes with this that tells you what section the activity goes with, along with how much time you should carve out for your class if you're going to plow through that particular activity. You want to talk about our courses, George?
What we've decided is we picked a course ID that we think would be the most valuable to you. So Woodbury 17446 is from my online course this semester. I've included resources that I provide to my students, like a set of pointers that they use and incorporate into their guided notebook. Also exam preparation, practice exams, that sort of thing. So if you're teaching an online course or an in-person course, I think this would be valuable for you to have. Mike has one as well.
Yeah, so my course has, first and foremost, it has those classroom notes actually filled in. You'll see them under each chapter. So like the chapter 4 filled in classroom notes, there's going to appear below chapter 4 of the interactive assignment. In addition to that, I have homework for every single section that I wrote. And what I do with my homework is I make each problem worth a different point value depending on how involved the problem is. So that's in there. I have practice tests. I have mastery homework based on that practice test. That's the old personalized homework. And then I have actual exams, and my actual exams have a lot of custom exercises in them, as well as free response. So yeah, feel free to download those. This course happens to be a coordinator course, so sometimes you'll see things pop in there that are new or changes that are made. If you want to, you can quote unquote dismember from the coordinator course if you want. In addition to that, George and I both have websites that have resources that you might find helpful. So I'll talk about my resources first, and then George will talk about his. So this is a screen capture at sullystats.com. And then what you would do is click one of your textbooks and then get some ideas for the introductory stat course. The material down here where it says chapter 1, chapter 2, and 3, this is basically a version of the content that's in the instructor resource guide. However, there might be additional ideas or data sets that you could use here if I come up with one after we go to print. The two areas where I want to focus you in on, though, are this websites and data sites link. So over here on the left, these are links to websites that you're going to find important. So there's the GAZE report, for example. Here's the ASA's education section. They have great ideas there. AMATIC has a 2-year college stats research page as well. And then this is CAUSE, the Consortium for the Advancement of Undergraduate Statistics Education. They have a lot of great resources too. And then over here on the right, I provide links to various places where you can go get your own data if you want. This one on StatCast, for example, for all you baseball fans out there, StatCast literally collects data from every single baseball stadium throughout the country for every single pitch that's thrown. So you can find things like pitch speed, you can find things like exit velocity of home runs from that particular website. And then down below are data archives like the data stored in Story Library, Quora. Data World is one that I use quite a bit. And then lastly, I have videos here. Two videos that I want to point you out to. First is this Learn About StatCrunch. So again, if you're new to teaching statistics or have not tried StatCrunch, you can watch this 3-part video series where I show all the different StatCrunch tools and how I implement them in my classes. This was filmed live at Anne Arundel College in Maryland. And then over here on the right is a video I recently created on how to create surveys in StatCrunch. Your students are going to want to be analyzing data that they find interesting. And so what better way, rather than the first week of class, to, with your students, build a survey, and then you can administer that survey to not only your students in the class, but you can use social media to administer this survey as well and collect all kinds of data that your students wrote the question so that if they're not interested in it, it's their own fault.
Yeah, so this is a blog that's from my site. So I put the address in the box there at the top, georgewoodbury.com/statblog. And the thing I wanted to point out here, this is where I write all my statistics related articles, but on the right side where the arrow is, day by day, what I did for an entire semester is I blogged about exactly what I did in class. I shared the documents that I use inside of class. And I think that if you're trying to teach this course for the first time, or if you have a colleague that's never taught this course, I think having that sort of roadmap is very helpful. In addition, because of the way that I flip my classroom, I have more time in class to stretch my students a little bit. And so I've also included the use of some non-parametric techniques early in my course to get students used to the idea of inference before we formally discuss it. And so you can find those sort of worksheets in there as well. So everything that I did, I described what happened that day, but I also have a link to a document that you could use or adjust depending on your preference.
So now what we want to do is transition to the co-requisite support material. The first thing we have on the screen here is the layout of how George's CoReq works and how my CoReq works, and you can see that they're pretty similar. At Joliet Junior College, we have a 4-hour stat course plus a 1-hour supplemental instruction section. So what I do is the 4-hour stat course is your traditional stat course. The supplemental instruction section, I use that time for group learning. We have what's called a collaborative classroom on our campus. I call it, it looks like a Starbucks without the barista, basically. And so students can work in little pods. They can work at tabletops, they can work at high tops, they can work at comfy couches. There's TVs there where they can share documents. And it's a great way to, once again, get the students engaged with each other and involved in peer-to-peer instruction. And then the students submit their assignment to me, and I grade it and give them feedback. So that SI section is a great way to do a formative assessment. We CoReq on a just-in-time basis in this course. And so just like I showed you initially, and I'll show you a little bit later, as the students are working through the stat material, we remediate the CoReq material on a just-in-time basis. We do what I've deemed a homogeneous grouping, so that the students that are in the CoReq section are the same as the students that are in the corresponding stat section. So we don't mix, I'll just put in air quotes, college students with CoReq students in the stat section. I realize for some folks that's just not possible, but some studies have suggested that homogeneous grouping is superior to heterogeneous. And then lastly, having the same instructor for both the CoReq remediation as well as the college level course is better. It allows you to pick and choose times and content from one course to the other. And then I think George wants to add a little bit to what I just said there.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing at College of Sequoia as Mike is, except our support course is 2 hours instead of 1. And with our extra hour, we're also bringing in study skills, materials, working on growth mindsets and those sorts of things, because again, we feel that our students, because they're missing anywhere from 1 to 3 prerequisite classes, they're not developing the student skills that are necessary for a math or statistics course. And so we're trying to help them become better students as well as teaching them the skills that they need to be successful in stat.
Right. And George raises a good point. I think on a weekly basis, I bring in some sort of a mindset or study skills idea and talk about it with my class. Again, one of the beauties of having interactive statistics is it does free up a lot of classroom time. And with CoReq students especially, they do need that reinforcement of what it means to be a student and how much time is going to be required in order to be successful in the course. So let me show you over here. If you go back to the main menu and then go to skills for success, these are mindset videos that are based on the Carolyn Dweck content. In addition, we have college success modules, and then we also have professionalism tools. And so these are assignable in your course as well to assist those students in terms of things like developing a growth mindset, understanding the power of mistakes, understanding the power of yet, which is I'm not there yet, but I'm going to get there, as opposed to giving up too soon. In other words, that whole idea of productive persistence. Now let's dive into the co-requisite materials. I alluded to this earlier, but I'm going to show you exactly what our vision was in terms of this CoReq content. So over here again is the left navigation bar. And what I did, let me just back up a page. Notice that here's chapter 1 of the stats, and then right below it is chapter 1 of integrated review. As I mentioned to you, chapter 1 of stats does not really require any remediation material. So while the student is working through chapter 1 of statistics, they can also work through chapter 1 integrated review in order to get them ready for chapter 2 of statistics. Chapter 2 of statistics is things like frequency distributions, bar graphs, relative frequency, histograms, so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of things about fractions, decimals, and that nature. And so that's what we address in the Chapter 1 integrated review, getting ready for Chapter 2. When the student clicks Chapter 1 integrated review, getting ready for Chapter 2, right below you'll see a layout of the topics that are covered, and I'm not even showing them all. There's 3 other topics in there. So let me go to the live course so that you can see what this is going to look like. Main menu, interactive assignments, there's Chapter 1. And so these are the 8 sections that are in Chapter 1 integrated review. I want to make sure you're aware of the fact that this content is based on the content in my developmental math series. However, I did massage it in order to make it the content and the examples and exercises more appropriate for introductory statistics. Now, we realize that your students are going to be coming into this class with a wide variety of skill sets. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we didn't force students that have demonstrated knowledge of content to have to plow through all of this material. So the students are all going to begin with this Chapter 1 integrated review quiz. The quiz contains information on everything from Chapter 1. If your student passes the quiz with whatever grade you decide to be enough, like we've set 80% as the default, but you could easily change that to 70% or 75% or whatever value you want. If the student reaches that threshold, however, they can immediately move on to Chapter 2 and getting ready for Chapter 3 of statistics. If the student does not pass this material, then what they're going to do is go to fundamentals of fractions and sort of repeat the process, but at the section level. They would take this quiz on fundamentals of fractions. If they pass, they move on. If they don't pass, they're going to get a personalized homework. And the personalized homework is essentially setting up homework based on the types of problems that the student is struggling with. Then the student gets the opportunity, after reaching some threshold, in this case our default is 90%, they then are able to take the retake quiz. Now, we want to make sure that students have access to the tools that they need in order to succeed. So we have 2 different resources here. The first is an e-text. So again, as I mentioned, this material is based on my developmental math content. And so here is fundamentals of fractions. This is a QR code where the student could use their phone to have access to all the videos for the section, but then these show where the videos are housed. But what I want to do is just scroll down and show you how much detail is in this text, as well as additional homework problems. So these quick check problems can be assigned as homework as well. And then there's end of section homework problems that are housed in my lab. But then look at this particular example here, problem 55. If I zoom in on it, you'll see that it says a survey of 2,278 adult Americans, 1321 believe there's a link between video games and teenagers showing violent behavior. Write this as a fraction. And so that's clearly a statistical type of scenario, but it's placed in the fractions material. And so we're constantly preparing students for the type of language and arithmetic skills that they're going to need in order to be successful in the corresponding statistics course. And there are sections in here that are brand new just for this section, like language used in modeling. If I open up this section, you'll notice that what we're doing here is introducing the students to the idea of mathematical modeling and getting them comfortable with translating from English into math. Like, what does the word total mean? We all take that as for granted that we understand what it means, but your students may not. And so here's a problem that just says, what's the total number of people surveyed, rather than saying, hey, find the sum of these 4 numbers. Again, all these problems are written with a statistical flavor to them to help your students get ready for the corresponding statistics material. And as I mentioned, we have these lecture videos. So here's all the videos that correspond with the same material. So here's an example of one of the videos. The reason I want to point this out is, again, I want to emphasize to you how we worked really hard to create content that's going to get your students ready for statistics. For example, in least squares regression, your students certainly have to have an understanding of the meaning of slope, and they're going to have an understanding of things like the point slope formula and the slope intercept form of a line. This video is from an intermediate algebra course, this data over here that you're looking at is actually a data with a story behind it that I lay out in the video. These are the number of days of absences, and these are the exam scores for that particular content. Notice the students are drawing a scatter diagram. They're choosing 2 points and finding the equation and a line through those 2 points down here. So this truly gets the students ready for the idea of regression. They're finding a line that describes the relationship. It just happens to be a line using the slope-intercept form of a line. So again, very, very powerful in getting your students ready for their statistics course. So your students have ample opportunity to remediate between those two resources.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing to what you were saying. So I think that these materials, what's really powerful about them is how flexible they are. You could use these in any sort of environment. So some of us will be teaching our support courses in a computer lab, and we can have students watching videos, working through problems there. But these are also things that students can do at home, so you don't need to have the lab to make them work. I think they're designed to provide a lot of flexibility. And you know, nobody knows the connections between dev math and stat better than Mike does. So he's done a really good job in setting us up for success here.
Oh, thanks, George. I'm blushing.
Here we go.
We wanted to end by showing you some of the results that we've experienced using this. So these are the results from Joliet Junior College, where we've been doing co-requisite statistics now for 2.5 years. So up here, this happens to be just for 3 semesters worth of data. We're constantly updating this through our institutional research, but the sample size is large enough to give you an idea of what's going on here. So the first row here is our traditional course. We had 206 withdrawals, 1,006 completions, 835 of our students earned a C or better, which is approximately 68.9%, 74.7% getting a D or better. Down here is our CoReq sections. And in our CoReq sections, you'll notice that we have a pass rate of 63.3%. You would expect your CoReqs to be slightly lower pass rate than traditional because of the fact that the students haven't had access to either the remediation tools or directly placed into your stat course. But what's nice is the fact that these 2 pass rates using a two-tailed z-test for proportions are not statistically significantly different for either the C or better or the D or better. In fact, you can see the D or better, the difference is pretty much, what is that, 3.6%, not much at all. And so it's definitely doable to get your students through these CoReq courses. My experience in doing this is that you really, really, really need to spend almost every day reminding your students about the mindset that they need to have, what their responsibilities are in order to be a success. I was telling George before we got on this webinar today that even today I reminded my students, hey, every single day you need to be filling in that guided notebook. That's your resource that you're going to be using. You need to make sure you carve out only 2 hours per day as opposed to 8 hours over a weekend to do this work because your brain just can't handle it. And I actually said, hey, could you sit on a treadmill for 2 hours straight and not feel exhaustion? And I have one student that said she's a long distance runner, so she could, so that kind of ruined it. But the rest of the students like, well, no way. And so remind students, hey, your brain is a muscle too, and it's going to wear out and needs time to process the information that you're giving it. So to me, that's the key ingredient in having a successful CoReq course.
Well said. I think we'd like to sum it up here. We know that where we're heading, this is a challenging task, taking students that haven't worked their way up through the prerequisite materials. And we also think that it's an exciting time. We are on the verge of seeing more students earn college degrees and go on to lead productive lives in their professional careers. So it's definitely worth it. What Mike and I have tried to do is set the instructor and the student up for success. Mike and I also, because we're in the classroom, we understand the spot that you're in, and we just wanted to let you know that we're available to work with you. anytime, any place, anyhow. Whatever questions you may have as a new instructor, we're there for you. So we thank you for your participation today, and we hope to be hearing from many of you down the line. Thanks so much.
Yep, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.